Welcome back to episode 4 of the Big Knick Energy Podcast. My name is, as always, Brad Dressler, your co-host. But we've got a special guest, a friend of mine, friend of the show, I should say, my buddy James Ryder. Unfortunately, Joe Yoke is unavailable this weekend, which is perfectly fine. We're going to be, full steam ahead with or without the Bald Kid Wonder. But that said, my buddy James Ryder, former contributor, current contributor of Daily Knicks, I should say, current contributor of also Let's Talk Knicks, tremendous writer. James worked under me, and I worked alongside him for a little bit over a year with Daily Knicks, and it was a lot of fun just reading, his takes on anything and everything Knicks related, and it was just an absolute pleasure. For the time that we did spend working together. James, how you feeling, buddy?
I'm feeling pretty good. The Giants just got a win. The Knicks are 1-1. Yeah, I've got some good stuff going on with, like you said, the writing. I'm at Daily Knicks. I'm at Let's Talk Knicks. And it's a blast so far with the start of the season. And it's always great to talk to you, to be here with Vinny. And yeah, this is exciting. So I'm glad to be here for the first time. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. We're actually the only Giants fans. I believe Angelo might actually be a Giants fan if I'm not mistaken, but we're in the presence of a Eagles fan. So
Go Birds.
Oh, come on. Why'd you invite me on here?
Yeah, I know. It sucks. But we're actually here to talk basketball today, even though the Giants did get a huge win. A win that, for whatever reason, I didn't think they were going to get, but neither here nor there. They've pulled out several much bigger wins than this one. I thought
there were 6 wins I didn't think they were going to get.
There are 6 wins that I thought they were going to get. Exactly my point. So we've got 2 games to discuss here today. We've got the Knicks losing in heartbreaking fashion in overtime against Memphis. It was there were stretches of that game where the Knicks didn't look like they belonged, and they somehow pulled it out. They got themselves in a position where they could tie the game, and then obviously, going into overtime, they were outscored 7-4. Could have very well had another home opener going into double overtime had Evan Fournier hit a 3-ball, but neither here nor there. Not for nothing. I thought they looked good, but I mean, if you had some general takeaways, James, what would you say you took away most from the game?
Yeah, for the first game, I thought they looked pretty good. Unfortunately, you can't always play the Celtics on game 1, especially if you're Evan Fournier. But I don't really knack the team much for how they played. I was just really encouraged by seeing the way Julius Randle played, especially, and we'll talk a lot more about that in a second. But just the fact that it's never easy to play your first game. We saw that there was a little bit of rust from everyone involved, especially with the bench. And there are some new guys in there, so it's going to take a little bit of time to mesh with sort of, I guess, the new play style. We know they're trying to play faster and everything. But even that, for as new as that's been, that looked great game 1 and looked even better in game 2. So, yeah, I mean, it was tough. I'm just glad that they were able to come back. They didn't die, after having such a rough second quarter. So it's encouraging right now. We're in a good place right now, I think.
Yeah, there were some really ugly spots between the second and the third quarter, but, we held our own in the first, and then we definitely held our own in the fourth for sure. And then obviously we have the win from Friday. I had the pleasure of being at the home opener. It was a lot of fun. Met John Starks. That was really cool. Knicks won 130-106. What were your, I guess, general takeaways from that game, aside from the obvious?
Well, I guess the biggest thing for me was just seeing Emmanuel quickly help carry that team, because for a little while there, it looked like it was going to be another kind of semi-rough night for the Knicks bench. But overall, that entire bench just rode the wave that quickly started. Obviously, a 20 bomb for him. Toppin had a ton of points as well. I think he had 13, if I wasn't mistaken, and he looked great. And they outscored the Pistons bench like 56-20 something, right? It was just insane. So the fact that the starters clearly had it all game and they were keeping the pace, and they were like, helping elevate them to the fact that they were up by like 20 or 30 points most of the time. That was good to see that the bench finally got involved and were able to not let the Pistons get back in that game. because it's always kind of scary when you see the Knicks have a lead. So you never want to blow that.
Right. And the first quarter, from what I recall, was relatively close. I think we left the first quarter, for the majority of the first quarter was pretty close, but then we kind of blew the doors open, and then we ended the first quarter like 30-20, and then that's when I knew we were going to take that game over. Quickly finished with a stat line of 27-7. Shot 3 from 8 from 3, and then 8 for 14 from the field. Pretty good game by the kid. And then obviously Obi Toppin, as you mentioned, you were off by 3 points. He had 16, 4 rebounds and 3 assists, 2 for 5 from 3, which is always encouraging. I don't want him taking that many threes. I want him to take between 3 and 4 a game. But in this situation, I mean, we were just blowing him out the entire game. So that was pretty encouraging to see as well. The crazy part is that no real stat lines stand out from that game too crazy, but it was just, we led from end to end. There was no point where we ever didn't have the lead in that game. But yeah, I mean, it like you said, it was encouraging. A lot of aspects of that game were, we'll touch on some of my major takeaways from that game in specific in a little bit. My first, I guess, takeaway, this is going to be a quick little segment. 3 major takeaways from the week's games, right? And first and foremost, this is going to be a hot take. I think that this might actually be, but granted, small sample size. We've only watched 2 regular season games, not putting too much weight into those preseason games, even though those were still kind of on brand. This might be the best version. This right now might be the best version of Julius Randle for the Knicks. Now, you would think, how could I say something like that when 2 years ago we had a guy who was all NBA caliber, was receiving MVP votes and averaging 25 a game and so on and so forth. In my opinion, I don't think that this Knicks roster needs a guy like Julius Randle to be the number 1 option. I think Julius Randle, the way he's been playing, kind of taking like a second or third man role, is the optimal version of Julius Randle that the Knicks currently, as they're constructed, need, with a legitimate point guard, with a score first guy in RJ Barrett. You need that Julius Randle type player to get the job done when it's necessary, but to not take all that shine. And I could not be happier with how Julius Randle has played. I think this is a better version of Julius Randle than we've ever had before. And that's in regards to this Knicks roster. What do you think, James?
I definitely agree with that a lot. I don't even think it's that much of a hot take. I mean, based on who you talk to, obviously, I'm sure, especially with the stats, obviously, it's not the same as what he did 2 years ago. But the thing with 2 years ago is we always knew that Julius Randle, it's like, that's not going to be him all the time. And even if he is, all NBA second team all the time, putting up 25, 5 and 5, like it's nothing. The Knicks, that's just not a sustainable way for them to win games if you're going to go anywhere meaningful. And so absolutely Julius Randle, the way he's playing right now, especially as a guy that's going to be more of a third or second option, depending on the game, in order to win games, that's way more sustainable if you're trying to be a playoff team. It's especially way more sustainable if you're trying to go beyond like the first round. Because a guy like Julius Randle, he's just not that guy when it comes to scoring that many points. But if he's definitely the guy that's going to be able to help your team win a game when the guys ahead of him in the pecking order don't have it. So the fact that he was able to do that against the Grizzlies, score the most points and help us stay in a game that it looked like we weren't going to win, that's huge. That's definitely the type of guy you need on your team when you're talking like hierarchy and who your stars are.
Yeah. I just want Julius Randle to be a slightly lower usage rate player and just try to focus on more so on efficiency. I don't need him taking 22 shots a game. That's just not what it is that we need from that position, especially when we have a true facilitator in a Jalen Brunson. And frankly, we have our number one scorer in RJ Barrett, and it's a guard driven league. So having a big like Julius Randle be that guy, like, I'm sorry, buddy, you're not LeBron James at the end of the day. So you taking that backseat role, I think him taking that backseat role is huge for the Knicks. And when we need him to step up and play the matchups and be that number one guy, depending on who it is that's defending him and so on and so forth, I'd like to see that happen. But more so than not, I do like a lot about what it is that I've been seeing. Number two, Jalen Brunson is absolutely everything the Knicks needed. Right now, through 2 games, he's averaging 7.5 assists per game. In the last game, he had about, I believe it was 9 and 6. So in the last game, he had 6. In game 1, he had 9 assists. And the best part about it is that they're clean. Like he gets his when necessary, but at the end of the day, he's focusing on getting others involved and putting guys in the best possible position. And I've just loved what I've seen so far. What about you, James?
Great point you made about him just being able to get the team organized and set them up for success. And we saw it right out of the gate. Well, first of all, we saw it in preseason in every game. Just the fact that he's able to not only just be so efficient and not just scoring the ball, but specifically in getting to his spots of where he scores the ball. He's so great at attacking the paint and even just getting to the mid range. And he's very crafty, even if he's not the most explosive or athletic guy in the world. He's just so good at getting what he wants when he wants it. And that's always important to have. But specifically what we saw in game 1 against the Grizzlies, the Knicks came out in the third quarter and they obviously had a lot to do if they wanted to get back into the game. And right away, Jalen Brunson took control. He completely changed the way the Knicks looked. He had 5 of his 6 assists up to that point, like back to back to back to back to back. And he had the layup. He was working off Julius Randle too. He wasn't just dominating the ball. He was just as much a factor of being able to feed off his teammates as he was propelling his teammates. He had that layup off the pass from Julius Randle that got the Knicks the lead back for the first time in the third quarter. That was a huge play. And yeah, just it's amazing to see what a real point guard could do for your team. It just looks totally different right now for the Knicks on offense compared to the last couple of years.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's not really much else to say except for the fact that I've said this since the preseason. I don't think that this is the best version of the Knicks. I think that they definitely have work to do. It couldn't be more evident that they needed to make a trade for like a Donovan Mitchell or some sort of a star for a number of reasons, right? Just because of how the roster is currently constructed. And we have a lot of depth, but we're lacking that one true man A. But with that said, I still think that everyone is performing really well. I think no matter what, that this team is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Whether they win or lose, it's gonna be close. Now, that actually takes me into my third and final major takeaway. As long as the Knicks are keeping things close and beating up on teams that they're supposed to beat, you got a happy Bradley, that's for sure. Because in all reality, are we gonna, is it possible to win every game? No. There's gonna be some that we think that we're supposed to win that we're gonna lose, and there's also gonna be others that we thought we were supposed to lose and we're gonna end up winning. But when we're losing to teams, I don't care how many players that Memphis was missing and this, that, and the third. They have one of the best players in the league in John Morant, and we have no one even close to that ilk. And yet we still hung tight. And we weren't able to necessarily prevent Ja from getting his, but we did a really good job at working ourselves around that. And that you couldn't be more proud of. Now, to go to game 2, you want to see us beat up on teams like that, plain and simple, because Detroit is going to be a fun team in a couple of years, but right now we are the much more complete roster from top to bottom. And we need to take advantage of these games. These easy wins are supposed to look exactly how they did on Friday, and that's easy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's really that simple. Especially when you're in the middle, it could be a little bit overwhelming at times for the fans because you're not sure if the team, you're in the middle of the standings. Every game is a different battle. That goes for any NBA team, but there's that level of confidence you have to have in your team, and then when you're the players, in your teammates, and in your game plan of how successful you're going to be, especially against a team that won 50 plus games like the Grizzlies did last year. But it's very encouraging to see that even though we don't have such high expectations for the Knicks in terms of where they're going to finish at the end of the year, we do know that they should be able to handle a team like Detroit, who's supposed to be like on the lower half. And they absolutely did that the other night.
Yeah. So I asked you to actually bring some major takeaways yourself. So I kind of wanted to go into those really quickly as well.
Yep. All right. So my first big takeaway from the first two games is that we need to be a little patient with the bench unit. And so what do I mean by that? 2 years ago, nobody expected us to be the fourth seed, not even close. We weren't even sure we'd be a playoff team. But a big reason why we were even as good as we were is because everybody on the team was so impactful, was able to contribute in such a big way and just work cohesively. And then last year we thought there would be a step forward with that, and it was the complete opposite. Whether it was injuries or it was COVID or just it's questionable always what Tom Thibodeau is going to do with the rotations. We saw that step back, but this year, we need to have the bench prove once again that they could be sustainable, that they could come in when the starters don't have it on any given night and just be able to stay in the game. And we've seen that the first two games. Memphis, it was a little bit shaky. Like you had Cam Reddish, obviously, huge impact. Isaiah Hartenstein, pretty quietly, was playing great. And even though it was Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson and even Evan Fournier to an extent that kept us in that game, the bench was in the second half much better than they were in the first half in trying to just not let the Grizzlies and John Morant specifically manhandle them and just grow their lead. When Memphis was kind of getting ahead, it was very gradual. They weren't just like putting their feet on the Knicks' throat. So it was encouraging to see that they were able to not just like let the game get away from the starters. But then against the Pistons, it looked like it was going to do that, like that was going to happen again. And the complete opposite happened, which was the fact that Emmanuel Quickley, a guy who a lot of people were kind of getting really low on all of a sudden after just one game, he came out and put on a show, and everybody fed off of that. So the Knicks have always had the depth. It hasn't always come together, but we have the talent where we need to just have faith and trust in those guys that they're going to make it work. And so you never want to read too much into anything, especially after only two games. But as far as the bench goes, I think we need to be just a little bit patient, but I think it's going to work out for them.
I think it's absolutely absurd that people are all of a sudden just getting so low on our homegrown, one of our crown jewels in Emmanuel Quickley. And it's no coincidence that it's usually coming from a lot of the same people that were a part of the Cam Hive prior to the season. Yeah, I'm strictly speaking on Knicks Twitter, and the different variety of personalities that we find on there. But it's just like, how can you, like, we know what Emmanuel Quickley is and we know what he isn't at this point. I feel that although maybe he does shoot a little too often, and kind of, he's let's just call a spade a spade. The kid's a Chuck sometimes. Like every now and again, he just takes way too many shots, plain and simple. And maybe doesn't try to get other people involved as much as one would like. But for people to get down on Emmanuel Quickley, who above everything else just provided us fans with one of the most encouraging and fun seasons that we've ever had as a fan of this team, and he was a part of it 2 years ago. And yet you guys want to get down on Manuel quickly just because you had a crappy take on Cam Reddish, and that's what you want to use as your defense. Well, Cam Reddish looked good and Emmanuel quickly looked bad. Maybe we should trade Emmanuel quickly. It's absolutely ridiculous. But what was your second takeaway, buddy?
Just to keep going with what you said there for a second. People have to take off their cam glasses, I think, sometimes. Their cam tinted glasses, I guess you could say, especially when it comes to quickly, because I get it. Like, Cam is a very tantalizing talent, and we want to see him succeed because the Knicks need as much talent going forward as they can get. But to just absolutely turn on a guy like quickly, so quickly, no pun intended.
Pun intended.
Yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous. Like, the guy's definitely got to improve his efficiency if he's going to be a better player. And it's year 3. I understand that there's a little bit of urgency with wanting to see the development, but we got to relax just a little bit, especially after only 2 games. So my second takeaway, if I could unlock my phone, is Hartenstein is already paying off, I think. Just the fact that Mitchell Robinson was in foul trouble, which I thought was a thing of the past against the Grizzlies. The fact that he ended up only playing 13 minutes because of it and had 2 rebounds, which is just insane. Like, you'd think the Knicks would get blown out if anybody on their team was putting up such low stats, and was, of course, like, in huge foul trouble like Robinson was. But Hart played 40 minutes, and Steven Adams was giving him hell, as he tends to do. The strongest guy in the NBA. I think Hartenstein got hit in the face like 3 times, and yet he was just, he was good enough. He was good enough. But then I think it really showed in the Pistons game what it is that we expect Hartenstein to contribute, which is that when he comes into the game, you go from, okay, Mitchell Robinson, we know he's a huge threat efficiency wise and going to the rim and offensively rebounding and protecting the rim on defense. Everybody knows what Mitchell Robinson does. This is Isaiah Hartenstein's first real opportunity to get major minutes, and he just gives the Knicks an entirely different look on the floor. And it's what we were all heard when they signed him. It's what we were all anticipating. And against the Pistons, and even against the Grizzlies, like I mentioned earlier, he had something like 7 points and 2 assists in like his first 6 minutes, and he was like the only bright spot against the Grizzlies. But then last night, Mitchell Robinson still didn't even play that well, and yet Hartenstein came into the game, and the Knicks still looked really good. And you could see Tom Thibodeau is really trying to use Hartenstein in the way that he would use like a Joakim Noah back in Chicago. Just because that's the type of guy that Hartenstein is.
Shout out Angelo. Shout out Angelo.
Yeah, he stretches the floor.
Loves the comparison.
Yep. He stretches the floor. He shoots the 3 ball. He's already made a couple, which is encouraging because the sample size was questionable coming in. He plays with so much energy. I heard Mike Breen talking about it a lot. How like something as simple as like the Knicks making their free throws. You look over the bench and Isaiah Hartenstein's like clapping. He's standing up. He's just a teammate's, like, he's probably like a lot of guys' favorite teammate. And it's awesome to see a guy that could come in and just throw the other team for a loop, throw the game plan kind of out of the window and be like, okay, we're dealing with this. And like Mitchell Robinson could be a huge problem alone. And now it's like iHeart checks in and you're like, oh man, the defense is still going to be pretty good, but now we have to worry about the big man setting up all of these slashers and everything for the Knicks, like Obi Toppin and Cam Reddish getting passes from the center. Like, that could be dangerous. And so far, it's already looked pretty good.
Yeah. I'm not going to add too much because I think you broke that down beautifully. But one thing that I did notice, where I don't necessarily think those at home would have recognized this, but when the guys were coming out pregame, right, to warm up prior to the game starting, everybody kind of jogged out. You got Isaiah Hartenstein in his first home game as a New York Knick. He jetted out of that tunnel, and with the biggest smile on his face. So that's one thing that I noticed right away, and I thought that was really cool because you could sense the energy, you can sense the happiness in his situation. I'm glad that that he was able to get a nice little payday, but also B, provide the Knicks with probably their best backup center that they've had since Mitchell Robinson uh took over the starting position. Say what you want about Nerlens Noel, he played great, especially 2 years ago, but it was basically just like copy and paste from Mitchell Robinson 2 years ago. Whereas now we actually have the ability to give a different look, especially on the offensive end. Now, there's obviously, one thing I did notice while I was at the game on Friday as well. He's not the same offensive rebounder, but then again, who is, right? So there's obviously going to be some give and take, but it's definitely encouraging to see. Last but not least, number 3.
Yeah, Nerlens Noel is basically just watered down Mitchell Robinson. um, okay, so last one is I don't know. This might be really controversial for everybody. I'm sure Nick's Twitter is gonna hate me for saying this, but Evan Fournier has to go. He is. Listen, he's played fine the first 2 games. That's not why I'm saying this. Everybody knows where I'm going with this. Cam Reddish, Quentin Grimes, even Miles McBride, to an extent RJ Barrett, and to a large extent Emmanuel Quickly. That is a lot of guys and not a lot of playing time. And you're paying Evan Fournier the amount that you're paying him. If you were a contender and you're paying him that money, great. Like, okay, he's one of the best shooters in the league. And every now and then, he's going to help out, like dishing the ball or just getting his own shot, like if you really need a bucket. But he's not doing that on this team. And he shouldn't be doing that on this team because we have guys that are going to contribute on defense, like Cam Reddish and Quentin Grimes. And we have those guys that, those 2 in particular, that need to show that they can be constants in this league, that they could have a rotation spot, and not even just a rotation spot on this team. One of those guys should be starting without a doubt. And we just apparently let Donovan Mitchell go in a way because we wanted to specifically keep Quentin Grimes, a first-year player who apparently was too good to get traded for.
Timeout. I don't like this narrative. I don't believe in this narrative. I just based off of everything that I've heard, plus our little Knicks inside source that we have, in no way, shape, or form was Quentin Grimes untouchable. That is a stupid narrative, and I'm sorry, but if you believe it to be true, you're incorrect. I'm sorry. He was untouchable in the sense of they weren't interested in including RJ Barrett and Quentin Grimes in the same deal. So I'm sorry to kind of step on your point right now, but it's just a fact, right?
I understand it. I know all that, but like the fact that a rookie player is like at all, even just to the smallest extent, like you just mentioned, because you don't want to pair him with RJ, it's like your problem should be with trading RJ, period, not with who you're throwing into the deal. You know what I mean? That's why I'm like getting out in that respect.
Well, in their defense, though, James, I mean, think about it. If they are going to go to the extent of including an RJ Barrett, for example, they clearly see Quentin Grimes maybe not on the same level as RJ Barrett, but close enough to where they don't want to put those 2 things together. It's like, think about it, bro. It's like, if you're asking me for $10, right? This is a stupid example. I don't know where I'm going with this one.
Do you want tickets to a WNBA game or $1? That thing,
right?
Sort of thing?
No. If you asked me to borrow $10 and I was like, no, but I can give you 2 5s and 2 singles. It's like, wait, what? Like, really? You know what? Don't listen to anything I just said. But the point is that you don't want to give up both guys for a number of reasons. I'm sure Tom Thibodeau had some. What the hell was I even going? Where the hell was I going with that? I'm sure Tom Thibodeau had some influence on whether or not Quentin Grimes was gonna be let go or not in that deal. But I get it. I get if they're gonna go as far as to offer. What the hell was I saying with that example?
I think your problem is you tried to rationalize something that the Knicks do, and I don't think that's ever possible.
Right. Exactly. The point being is I understand why they wouldn't want to give up both guys. Like if they're going to go as far as to give up an RJ Barrett, they don't want to also give up a guy that they think that could have maybe close to the same ceiling, but neither here nor there. I get where you're coming from. As far as Evan Fournier, and we'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up on this, but as far as Evan Fournier, right? I can understand, like, you need shooting in this league, and frankly, he is one of the best shooters in the league. But from the 2 games that I've watched him play so far, and this reminds me a lot of last year too, he's not really impacting winning. Like I'm looking at his stat line from the other day, and granted it was a blowout, but 8 points on 2 from 5 from 3. I just don't see him. I don't care about the numbers on the box score, but I just don't see him coming up big in big time situations where you really need that bucket and you're looking to the veteran guy to go get it for you. Frankly, I also kind of feel bad because ever since he got here, it's kind of just been like Tibbs saying, "You are now Reggie Bullock." He's like, "No, I am Evan Fournier." It's like in the worst French accent possible. He's like, "No, I am Evan Fournier." And Tibbs is like, "No, you're Reggie Bullock." And that's kind of just, sit in the corner and play defense like that. That's just not his game, and I don't think he really fits this team all that well. I understand why you want to pair a guy like Evan Fournier with a Julius Randle, for example, but I just don't see the fit, to be honest. And I would say if they have any intention of keeping Cam, obviously Evan Fournier has got to be the one to go for a number of reasons. But with that said, I want to touch on 2 more things really quick, and then I guess we'll wrap things up. Kind of to piggyback off our last point, I think we have some time to go over this. Listen, after a shaky last season, between injuries and he had a couple of games where he looked okay, but just with Cam Reddish, it was never about talent. It was always about consistency, right? And the problem with that is when you're inconsistent in this league, especially when there is so much depth on the Knicks, you're going to have this kind of problem where it's like, who do we get rid of? Do we get rid of Cam Reddish, who's the expiring deal? Do we get rid of Quentin Grimes in an attempt to upgrade at a certain position and use him as like a trade chip? Do we get rid of the veteran who can go to a team that's contending now and try to get more trade assets or draft capital for down the road? I think there's pros and cons to trading specifically Cam Reddish. And I kind of just wanted to touch on those really quickly. Like, obviously with Cam, he's looked really good in 2 games, especially game 1. I mean, the reason why we were even in a position where we could go to overtime was because of the fact that Cam Reddish was in this position. Put the Knicks in that position rather. Obviously he has a pending contract extension, and I don't know really how much a guy like Cam Reddish is going to warrant on the open market. The fact that he is a restricted free agent does play well into what it is that the Knicks are trying to do. Maybe we could include him in a deal and a sign and trade or whatever the case may be. But what do you think? I mean, so based off your last point, you think that the Knicks should try to keep a Cam Reddish and a Quentin Grimes over Evan Fournier and try to see what they have in Cam. You think so?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as it concerns to doing that as quickly as possible, as fast as possible. I think you need to get Evan Fournier out. Maybe even Derrick Rose, but I'll get to that in just a second. The thing with Evan Fournier is just he's clearly the odd man out, and Knicks fans have been shouting that from the rooftops, whether it's because they thought Evan Fournier was overpaid or whether they thought it's because he doesn't contribute enough to winning or any of that stuff, all of the above. For a while now, that seems to be not just the popular opinion, but the right opinion, if there is even such a thing. Forget the Donovan Mitchell stuff. There's too many guys. It's just this simple. There's too many guys on the team that deserve a chance to play. You need to know what you have in a guy if he's going to be on your roster. Otherwise, he's a waste. And what I don't even care that that pick seemed to not be that valuable. You still traded a first round pick for Cam Reddish. You don't trade for a guy, forget what you're trading. You don't trade for a guy so that he could just not play and get a true opportunity to prove himself. And when you're talking about a Knicks team that is clearly has their eyes on the future, best case scenario this year is what? The sixth seed. You're not going to get to the second round. So what are we doing here? Why are we wasting our time trying to get Evan Fournier to play 20 minutes when you have three guys right behind him that will probably end up being just as good of NBA players as far as what Evan Fournier is able to contribute right now if you give them the proper development. So those guys, you got to find a way to get them in. That's all.
Yeah. I think it's just it really what it boils down to is like if another star trade doesn't magically appear over the next I don't even know. Star trades are rare to happen at the deadline. We just don't see a ton of those, especially with all the moving parts that generally come with them. But for the first time ever, you know me, right? What was the one thing that I used to love writing about as an editor at Daily Knicks? Just like trade articles on trade articles, trying to figure out how to play the best version of the general manager of the team. I would hate to be in their position because I really don't know what it is that they're looking to do. It's so up in the air with where the Knicks are going right now. It's going to be exciting, but the last thing I want to
things
touch on,
I have to add just to that. So like you just said, it's not easy to move anybody in the league, but I actually think it would be a little bit easier to move, especially Evan Fournier as we get closer to the trade deadline. So I am optimistic on that front. And then I touched on this a second ago, the thing with Derrick Rose. Shout out to Jonathan Macri. There's a New York Post article that he quote tweeted I saw on Twitter today. And it was a quote from Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose played 16 minutes last game, and he played only like 13 minutes the game before that. And Derrick Rose basically said, like, I don't care how many minutes I'm playing. I'm not playing that good right now. But I don't care if I'm on the floor. I don't care as long as I'm playing good and as long as the team's winning. He's good with that. Derrick Rose is at that stage of his career where he just wants to win. And so as far as the Fournier situation goes, I used to be like full blown, get him or Derrick Rose out of here so we could get Emmanuel quickly and everybody else playing time. But if Derrick Rose wants to take that back seat, I'm not going to complain if you have Derrick Rose waiting in the wings when the Knicks really need him to get out there and score the basketball. And then, of course, just to be around as the mentor that he's been. So I think it's great that we have a guy like Derrick Rose who just is here to help, basically. And he has Tom Thibodeau's ear, so that could be a huge thing going forward.
Yep. Yeah, man. I couldn't really agree more. So with that said, that's going to be the end of our time. I do appreciate you jumping on and giving your takes. I totally get where you're coming from as far as Derrick Rose, and I think that he is a key component of the team, but I think it's slowly becoming true that the odd man out is going to be Evan Fournier for sure. With that said, today is Sunday. This will probably be out most likely before the game, if I'm not mistaken. We've got Orlando tomorrow. Orlando is an 0-3 team. Paolo Banchero looks every bit as worth of a first overall pick. The kid looks really, really good, but they're an 0-3 team that's held their own. And as we know, we lost our first home game last year, I believe, or second home game, first or second home game last season to the Orlando Magic. So I know there's definitely some redemption in store. I'm excited for that game. As mentioned, even if they do keep it close, frankly, we need to beat up on these types of teams, plain and simple. That said,
it was tough. It was tough to see them lose games to the Magic last year, but they're definitely an improved team. So it's going to be a little
Magic
bit of a
are
challenge.
just this like weird team that for whatever reason just has the Knicks number forever, even back when Evan Fournier was there. But that said, let's wrap things up. Jamesy, where can they find you, buddy?
All right, you guys can find me on Twitter at The Ride Show, spelled like my last name. You can see it here on the screen, RYDE, The Ride Show. You can find me with Daily Knicks, as Brad mentioned earlier. I'm still writing articles on there. And then my new place is Let's Talk Knicks. And so I'm over there. You'll see me tweeting for the live tweeting for the Orlando game on the 24th. I'll be doing that. I'll be writing the preview for that. So just look out for that. Check out our Substack. We've got our articles on there now too. And we are going to have a podcast of our own soon. I'm going to hopefully try to get on that as much as I can. If you guys ever want to have me back, I'll gladly be a guest. It was a blast. It's always great to talk to you, Brad, Vinny. Thank you for the invite. And yeah, that's about it.
Yep. Yeah, man. I appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming. Definitely going to check out all of your work moving forward. Of course, you can find us at Big Knick Energy _ on Twitter, at Big Knick Energy on Instagram, and of course, Big Knick Energy anywhere and everywhere imaginable. You can find me at Brad Dressler 24. You can find our lovely producer Vinny at Modelo Beckham. Got the Magic tomorrow. Let's pray for a 2-1 start to the season, and let's go Knicks, baby.